Okay, so continuing with the tutorial to build an order form, we see that our basic form works, that our form action sends us to our generic form action page so that we can see we are getting the values to our action page we want. So let's go back and look at our fields. So we did customer ID. Next thing we need to pick is employee ID. So let's go to Dreamweaver. So our next field will be employee. This one needs to also be a select field, a drop down. So we'll do form, select. Let's fix up our labels. And I'm just using Control X to cut and Control V to paste to move those label tags and get rid of the label they automatically created. Now I'll click on the select field. We can go in, let's change the name. This is going to be employee. It's required. We want to make sure it's associated with the order form. And then we can use this dynamic button down here in the properties box to bind it to a record set. But now that I look at this, if we go to the record set, we don't have a record set yet for employees. So we'll have to go to server behaviors first. Hit the plus, record set. Let's name this one employees. We want this to draw off the employees table. And we need to display some stuff. So let's do employee ID and last name. Okay, we don't need to filter, and let's sort by last name. Okay, let's test this. Okay, and looking at this test data, we see we have an issue here. So we have two Callahans in our last name. So if somebody were picking from a list of last names, how would they know which Callahan they're picking? Maybe one of them is, the appropriate one to pick. All right, so I'm going to go back and say, okay, well, let's include the first name. All right, so we can do that. We can see we've got Callahan Jeremy, Callahan Laura. But when I'm filling out an order, I'm still not entirely sure which of these two people, or really for any of these people, are appropriate to be the employee placing an order. So let's look at one more thing. There's a title here. So let's put the title in there and do test. Okay, now we've got some more information. So we can see that Jeremy Callahan is a sales representative, but Laura Callahan is an administrative assistant. So it probably would be Jeremy that we want to pick whenever we're picking from an employee list. So we need this title information in what we see on the page. So, okay, we've got that. We'll do OK. We'll set the record set. Let's close out the server behavior. Go to to our dynamic field, and we want to do our stuff from employee. So we want our values to be the employee ID, but we want our label to be, oh, wait a minute, we can only pick one field. Well, we know if we pick last name, let's go ahead and save that. File, save. Go to our page, refresh. Well, if we just have the last name displayed, we have the issue of the two Callahans, and we don't know which one to pick. If we choose title, we know we wanted title information because the title determined if they were somebody who actually should be placing an order. Then we see, all we see is the title. We don't see their name. We've got multiple sales representatives, so we don't know which one to pick. So what we really need is we need the ability to display the last name, the first name, and the title all at the same time in one column. And if you remember from earlier tutorials, we can do that with aliases. We can create an expression that combines all those things together in one field, and then we can create an expression. All right, so what we're going to need to do here, we'll go back to our server behaviors. We need to get rid of this employee dynamic list, and we're going to edit our employee record set. Now, because we need to combine these columns together, we've got to switch to our advanced view. Okay, so we're here in the advanced view of our record set. And what we want to do is we want to take these three fields, last name, first name, title, and combine them into a single column in our database, which we can do with an expression, and then we want to use an alias to give it a title. So in MySQL, to combine strings together, we have to use the function concat. Okay, so we're going to use the concat function, and then all the parameters to the function are the things we want to concatenate together. So we're going to do the last name field, and then usually when you're listing last name and first name, you want to put a comma and a space between. So we're going to do a static string, comma, space, quote. Now, you'll notice when I added this string here, I used single quotes. In MySQL, you can use either single quotes or double quotes for when you're defining a static string. But we know that in PHP is going to use double quotes, so we'll use single quotes in our SQL so that the SQL and the PHP won't conflict with each other. So we've got last name, comma, space, first name, and then after the first name, let's add a string with space dash space in it, so that we have a little bit of formatting between the first name and the title. And then we'll add the right parentheses to end the concat function. And now let's use the as keyword to create an alias. And we'll call this column employee info. Since it's not just the name, it has info about the employee. So let's test that. and I think this is going to work well. We now have the employee ID as a column, and we have the employee info, last name, comma, space, first name, space, dash, space, and then their title, all as one column so that we can access it in the select list. So let's go ahead and save that. Go back to our employee field. We'll hit the dynamic button. We want our options to come from the employee's record set. The values will be the employee ID, and the labels can be this new employee info field that we picked. Okay, now let's save this and go back to our browser window to test. And boom, there we go. So now we have a list of customers to pick from, and we have our list of employees with the full info, last name, first name, and title, so we can see who the right one to pick would be. Okay, looking back at our field lists now, we've got customer ID, employee ID done. We see our next two fields are order date and required date. So we're going to need two date fields. So we'll come back to Dreamweaver. Let's create our labels. Order date and required date. Set our cursor where we want the field to be. Now, this is the really nice thing about Dreamweaver, is we have a date field that we can pick. Let's move our label tags. And get rid of the generic label they gave us. Go to our date field, and this first one is going to be called order date. We're not going to give it a default value. It is required. There's no particular range we're going to provide, and let's make sure it's assigned to the order form. That should take care of our order date. And then now let's do the required date. Same thing, form, insert the date field. Let's move our label tags to be around our label. Delete the generic label. We'll change the name of the field to be required date. We want to make it be a required field and associate it with order form. Well, let's save that. Go back to our browser window and refresh. So we can see, okay, we have two new fields, order date, required date. We can say today is the order date. We can say next Friday is the required date. And we'll submit and see that we did get those pieces. Order date 10/20, required date 10/30. Alright, looking back at our fields now, we've got order date, required date, shipped date. We're going to leave blank in the database because it hasn't been shipped yet, but we do want to specify who we're going to ship it by. So we're going to need a shipper ID field. Okay, well, remember with our cross-link, we have certain customers allow certain shippers. So we're going to have to do an advanced query with our crosslink in order to show us what we need. So let's go back to Dreamweaver. We get our label in, and since this is going to be a dynamic field, we know we're going to need a record set. Okay, so we're going to need a new record set. We can name this record set ship via, and then now we're going to build our SQL statement from the tables that we need. So we know we need customer ID and the company name. Let's test that. Make sure we see everything we need. Customer ID, company name, that looks good. Okay. Now let's go down to the shippers, and we need the shipper ID, and we need the company name of the shippers. So we put that in. Let's test that and see what happens. Now notice, when we did this, we get the customer ID, but now this company name field appears to be displaying the names of shipping companies. And we get the shipper ID, and this company name field, which should have been the shippers because it's listed last, is actually showing blanks. Okay, this is a side effect of how PHP handles getting data from MySQL databases, and the fact that PHP really doesn't like it when two columns have exactly the same name. So this column is company name, this column is company name. PHP is getting confused. So we need to use aliases anytime we have column names that are the same, so that we can help our PHP out. So we're going to go here to the customer's company name, and we're going to add an alias to that. So let's call this one customer name, since it's the customer. And then shipper's company name, we can add an alias to that and we can call it shipper name. Now if we test, then now we see we have two completely populated columns, customer name and shipper name, that are just fine. Okay. Now the last thing we need to do in our select list is that we know we can only display one column on the drop down, and for that column we're going to need to list the customer name and the shipper name together so that people can pick the correct one. So we're going to use our concat function again to pull these two things together. And since the customer name has an alias, we can use it. And then we'll do space dash space, and our shipper name has an alias, so we can use it. And let's test. Oh, wouldn't let us use the alias. Some SQL databases will let you use the alias in expressions. So instead, let's do the whole qualified thing. Customers.company name and shippers.company name. Test. There we go. Now this works. So now we can see that if we're going to be doing an order for around the horn, then we could see the shippers that are available. Well, right now you notice every customer has all 5 shippers available, and that's because we've selected from the tables, but we haven't done the where statement yet for the joins. So we need to do where, and now we need to do our joining. So we know customers.customer ID will be equal to our crosslink customers shippers dot customer ID, and then we want our crosslink customers shippers dot shipper ID to be equal to the shippers dot shipper ID. Now let's test. Oh, spelled something wrong. Yep. Capital S. Oh, I see what the issue is. I'm referencing the crosslink table, but I haven't added the crosslink table to the list of tables. So we have to have the crosslink table in our from list for the tables we're referring to. And there we go. So now we can see the only thing that's going to come up here is the companies that we have shipper relationships set up for. So this might be one field where we need to do a static option. And so let's decide that United Package shipper ID 2 would be our default for all other companies. And we can set that up on our form. So there's our record set. Now we need to add our select field. Let's move our labels. Delete the generic label. This field is going to be ship via. It's required. It's assigned to the order form. We're going to do a dynamic field. And now this one, this is our static options. So we want 2 to be our static option. And we decided United Package would be the default for other people, but then we can also get options from the ship via. We want the shipper ID to be one value, and we want our concat to be the other one. Let's see if that works. We may have to go back and give it an alias. So file, save. Refresh our form. And this is working. The default is United Package. And then we're not showing anything else. So we do need to go fix that. Alright, so back in Dreamweaver, we need to look at our ship via record set. And then we can see up here, we did the concat expression, but we did not give it an alias. So we'll call this as ship info. Let's do a test. Sure enough, there's our ship info column. Okay. And then now our dynamic list shows the exclamation point. There's been a change. That concat column doesn't exist anymore. So we'll go to the labels. We'll pick ship info for that. Okay. Let's save the page. Go back to our form, refresh, and then now we see we can either pick the default United package, or we can pick different shippers that are available depending on who the customer is. So we've got Alfred's up here, so we can pick DHL for Alfred's right there. And then if we do the submit, we said dates were required, so we have to do dates. And then now we see that our ship via value 5 is there.